Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. Good evening, and thank you for joining us today for another session in the Academy series. Today's session is going to be about FST management. I'll talk a little bit about timelines. That's why I said the time crunch. But I've added some other stuff as well, which I think is a little bit more relevant when you get to the event site. But more on that a little later. So to begin with, let me just give a quick introduction of myself. My name is Saiduth. I did my mechanical engineering at SRM University from 2014 to 18. So I was part of camber racing during that time. Primarily worked as an aerodynamicist, but I also had the opportunity to drive. And in my final year, I learned valuable lessons while leading the team. And I've tried to kind of apply some of that stuff that I've learned into this presentation. And hopefully by the end of this, you'll learn something. I'll be able to share some of the things that I've learned and some of the mistakes that I made during that time. And after that, I did my MSc in Oxford Brookes University. I did it in motorsport engineering. So during that time, I was part of the Oxford Brookes Racing autonomous team as a business plan developer. I decided to take a slightly different route from the standard combustion vehicles. So I learned a lot about the sort of market in driverless vehicles as well, a little bit of management in that side as well. So after that, I've primarily been working as a content developer at SkillShark EduTech, but I'm also now working as a systems integration engineer at Accor International. And my primary focus is race engineering as my technical career, and that's mainly what I'm building right now. I've been race engineering for esports teams, and I also create content on my own channel. So this is a little bit about me. On that note, let's go on to the presentation itself. So today's topic is about team management. A very obscure topic, really. There are no clear defined rules as such of how to go about managing and organizing your team as a whole. So a lot of this is going to be subjective. So please take this with a grain of salt and use your discretion to figure out whether this is actually applicable to your specific plan or not. Okay. So to start off with, I'll talk about some of the key milestones in the season that you'll need to look at and how your effective management is kind of split across different domains. After that, I'll talk a little bit about the design phase, the key parts of a design phase. Same with manufacturing after that. Once that is done, I'll talk a little bit about testing and event preparation and what you need to focus on and how everything is not over once you finish manufacturing. That's only the beginning of a lot of things that you need to focus on. And finally, I talk about event strategy. This is something which I think is very crucial, perhaps the most crucial thing. But we'll get into that. We'll get into those details a little later. Just as a side note, in this presentation, it'll be good if you can just keep your audio on mute for now. If you have any specific doubts, feel free to raise your hand in the chat box. If it's something very specific to that slide, and I'll be happy to answer it. But I'll try to wrap this up in right now it's 7:12 IST. Let me try to wrap it up by around 7:35, 7:45, because after that we can have some discussions together and I can clear your doubts, face to face. So on that note, let's get started. Firstly, season milestones. So the whole thing begins at your whole journey of creating FS car begins at the start, the inception of the season. Now there are three things you need to focus on: design milestones, manufacturing milestones, and corporate milestones. Now in design, you're basically going to have different phases of design. Concept phase, where you sit as a team, you decide specific objectives that you want for your car, specific parameters you want to focus on. Then you get into the development phase, where you actually start building building the design as a whole. Then you get into iteration. You start refining and iterating and making your car perform better, looking at all the compromises. That is where hardcore engineering comes into play. And then it's CAD assembly, where that's very crucial, because if all of that comes together, only then that it's somewhat going to come together in manufacturing. So in concept, it's mainly targeting, getting all the targets. Development is just making the overall car, and then the rest of the points are over there. Then in manufacturing, it's you have different phases. You first try to make some sort of a mock chassis. Usually you go for like a PVC chassis, use PVC pipes and kind of use tape and get a basic skeleton ready. Just to understand how the car actually looks as a skeleton. Then you got to get your rolling chassis ready. That's the first main milestone in manufacturing. You get on to running your car, and finally you get into hardcore, TI, making sure your car is event ready, and you start testing it in that TI ready form, because you need to test your car in the same way that you'll have your car at the event. Only then it's realistic. And corporate, you need to look at financial targets. Okay, so your whole season actually runs on where you have your money available. because that is one of the crunch points. That's one of the bottlenecks that's going to prevent you from actually having a smooth sailing season if you don't plan it properly. Financial targets will be obviously in manufacturing, and then event prep. Materials, again, sourcing in-kind sponsorships or potential monetary sponsorships as well that can help you in further you know saving a lot of costs in developing your car. And then sponsorship targets, we'll delve into that a little bit later, but those are more of event specific, what you're going to do on site. Yeah, and what I'm trying to show you here is the cash or the money that you have in hand while developing a car physically. That is what's going to actually control a lot of the stuff that goes on. Secondly, it's going to be dependent on manufacturing delays. And once you get your design ready, only then you can start manufacturing. And if all of this goes well, you can create the car and you get your end result of actually having a car that's ready to roll. Not quite though. There is one factor which we're missing. One key factor that can make or break a team, that is human resources, resource management. It's about how your team meshes together to create all of this. And this is by far the most strenuous bottleneck in your entire journey. So this is what you need to focus on the most as you create your entire car and you work through your season. Now, you need to, some key points you need to remember here. You need to assign tasks, right, based on strength and interest. Everyone joins the team because they're interested in working together. So the management team, whoever is in charge of trying to understand how the team is organized and kind of keep deadlines in check, you need to make sure that every team member is happy with what they're doing and know exactly what they need to do. Because as soon as you start crossing around and getting multiple people crossed over in many different subsystems, it might be good for the learning process, but if you don't manage that properly, it can potentially lead to a complete downfall in your team structure. Not in any sort of hierarchy or anything. Don't get me wrong here. This is not about one person being greater than the other. It's just about each person having their responsibilities. Some people are responsible for core designing. Some people are responsible for making sure all of that integrates together, right? It's about sticking to deadlines. Again, the biggest deal breaker within this. If you miss one deadline, you're going to have a concertina effect, and we'll talk about that a little later. Layout protocols, understand communication, team communication, how you're going to send documents, how you're going to keep track of team progress. All these need to be considered, and then always have a contingency plan. And again, I'll talk a little bit about this when we get into event strategy. Now, let's start off with design. Okay. Now, I'm giving you a mock timeline. This is by no means the only way to design. This is just something that I cooked up just as an example. So let's say you have different milestones. The first one is, of course, developing that concept. You want to spend a little bit of time developing the concept of your car. The next thing would be to get to the preliminary iteration. Then you have the final iteration of the car, and finally CAD assembly. Let's start off with concept. The first thing you need to do is set qualitative targets. You want to make sure that these are achievable goals. Okay, you want to know what type of car you want at the end of the day. Given you have a specific engine, what type of car do you actually want to have in the event? You want to have something that's very light and agile for that engine? Yes, of course, that's exactly what you want in a car. So you need to make sure you know what you're going to compromise with the material you have. And this is where you already start developing a budget. So you need to have a budget idea prepared before your concept. But as you develop that concept, you'll have to start making some adjustments to the budget. A lot of people might say that a budget is needed way before you even start this process. But you can't really set that to stone because there are so many parameters that you cannot really, foresee. I'm telling you, you could be designing something and building your car midway through the season, something can break. Okay, your engine might have a catastrophic failure. Who knows? There's so many things that can happen. So always have a contingency plan. Don't set your budget to stone just yet. Give it a little bit more time. Okay, so get your concept ready in a couple of weeks. After that, get into core designing. This is where you actually finalize your budget targets, because now you know your concept. You know that you want a car that has this type of engine. I need this much money to buy this engine. I want wings, so I need to have at least this much carbon fiber to develop that. Then I need to buy this many sets of tires because I have a testing goal of so many kilometers to set the car up before going to the event. All of these need to be understood here. Now, in the design phase, until you get to the preliminary iteration, make sure you have just an MVP. An MVP is a minimum viable product. Just enough to get your whole concept on paper. Rather, get your whole concept in a very rough CAD form. Okay, very basic CAD form. This is what you need to do. Spend a few weeks again for this. Then this is where your engineering process starts. You start iterating, finalize your in-kind sponsorship deadlines, because now you know exactly what you want. Do I want some Do I want a specific system sponsored? Do I want these components sponsored? Are these components something that I can source? I wouldn't have to completely rely on sponsorship. Now, I'm not telling you any names of components because I don't want to confuse you with any sponsorships or anything, but I'm just saying general software, hardware, logistics, all of this getting into account over here. And also by this point, you should know what what events you're going to target, because only then you can adjust this whole timeline to suit where you want to get to that, to suit the deadlines you need to meet for each and every event. Again, this refinement phase is where you can get a little carried away. And do you notice here I've actually put this milestone in red? The reason for that is this is a critical milestone. Set your deadline for this and do not exceed that, because one thing that can happen is we're all engineers. We want to make a car that it's going to perform at a very high level, and we just keep constantly trying to search for every little bit of performance. But this is where you need to be smart. How much are you actually going to refine, and how much of that are you actually going to manufacture? Remember, you can't just make some crazy let's say wheel upright design if you can't actually mill it, because it's going to be extremely expensive. Be aware of the sort of materials you're using. All of this, limit all of this to this phase. Get it done in 2 to 3 weeks time. Then this is where the real challenge comes into play. You start assembling all of this, put it together. Obviously, the chassis will always be there as a base CAD form, but then you're gonna have to keep refining that chassis, making sure that everything fits together, and you'll have to sometimes adjust certain designs to make sure everything fits, and make sure. And during this process, your chassis might vary a little bit. Make sure you don't move your hard points or anything. But this is the part where you actually start making mounts, making sure your engine and your differential and your your final drive, the gear and everything kind of fits into place. So make sure all of that is set in that phase. Once all of this is done, your design phase is basically complete. Limit this to a few months time. Few months is it's actually a very ambitious target, but try to do it in a few months, because design is only the start of a very long journey ahead, right? Understand subsystem dependencies, right? And know this before you start, because only then you'll know which subsystems you need to rely on. So if you have a delay, let's say in hardpoint, that's going to affect some other subsystem. It's going to affect packaging away cabin. So many different effects are going to come, and you won't realize this. So you might think, I missed it by a couple of days. What's the big deal? Starts with a few days. It becomes a complete. It starts as a snowball. It becomes an avalanche at the end. Okay, it happens almost like an accordion. You can't even keep track of where it's going. So make sure you don't exceed your deadlines. That is the first thing which I want you to understand as from this management tutorial. And yeah, so these are some of the other points. Again, don't exceed the deadlines. Consider leeway everywhere else. Okay, so you have deadlines, but even if you're going to exceed it, know how much you're going to exceed it, and consider that as part of your timeline. Okay, so you have a best case scenario, worst case scenario. If you go below the worst case scenario, deal's over, right? Very similar to a business plan. Next is manufacturing. Now, manufacturing, contrary to what you think, actually starts before design is finished. You start off with that PVC chassis. This is when you're right about the point where you have that final iteration, because this is where you want to physically get an idea of how your mounts are going to look. What angle is that mount going to be in? Am I going to be able to create am I going to be able to create a chassis tube with that sort of a fish mouth design? All these things you need to consider. So you need to know all of this, and that's why you need to create this PVC chassis. Okay, rolling chassis again is a target. I don't know, a few years back we had to submit some photographic evidence of the car or running car videos. Not sure if that's part of it now, but in such situations, you want to get your car rolling at least on the ground, because that's the basic. If you don't have that, there's no point in putting your engine in and getting your driver in. There's no car to run. So make sure you have a rolling chassis as well as part of your key milestone. Now the PVC chassis, keep iterating it, adjusting it a bit, get your per se design in there, make sure that all those rules are also met. All of this happens during this phase. And this is where you need to you need to finish off your SES and IAD. Somewhere around July, August, that's when all these documents are due to be submitted in a full scale season. So you need to start with your documentation during this point. Then once you have a basic idea, start with smaller components, things like wiring harnesses, electronics, coding, and things like that. You don't really need a full car ready for that. So you can already start the process of getting these things done. Get your electrical team working with your wiring harness support or sponsor or whoever. Get all these things started. You can't obviously finalize it, but these are things that you can start off with while you wait for material to get delivered to your garage. Machine your uprights. Again, you need this for your rolling chassis. Get it done early on, especially when your CAD is frozen, because trust me, uprights actually take a lot of time. And when you have small issues with tolerances and stuff, you might have to get a little bit of stuff remachined. So make sure you consider all of this. Then, start with the manufacturing of the chassis. That's going to take a couple of weeks time to really get right, especially if you're going for a tubular space frame. If it's a monocoque, I'm not entirely too sure because I haven't really worked on it much, but I'm assuming it's going to take a little longer than that. So make sure you consider all of these. Manufacture suspension elements, relatively simple. I can't say it's easy, but it's definitely something which you can perhaps do towards the ending phase of your rolling chassis. Then get your rolling chassis ready. After that, finish your C cabin assembly. Start getting your engine, all your components inside. Manufacture the body works. Prepare the car for TI. Spend only about a couple of weeks for this. If all goes as planned, in about a month, 2 months time, you can actually get your entire car ready, ready to run, right? But it doesn't just end there, right? Make sure you get this in 2-3 months, uh, done in 2-3 months. Consider delays, manufacturing tolerances. These are things which, if you exceed, are definitely going to punish you financially later on in the season. Test intermittently under safe conditions. Again, I'm writing a disclaimer here, right? You all know best how to make sure you're testing it safely. Okay, don't get hurt. Make sure you're safely testing. Have high visibility vests if you're doing it at night. Make sure you have good proper barricades, cones, fire extinguishers, the works, right? But get your testing. Start testing once that's done. Get the rolling car and running car deadlines. Hit those, because if you don't hit those, your testing phase is going to go for a toss. If you have some sort of a rental agreement, or you have some sort of arrangement for a test track that you're going to, that's going to go down the drain, and that's really expensive. If you get something like that sponsored and it slips away from you, it's going to cost you a lot if you want to still test. And if you actually want to gain the points in design and make sure your car doesn't break down in endurance, you need to test it. So again, there's no room for error over there. Leeway for bodywork is acceptable if it's non-performance. Okay, don't do it for like the nose cone, front wing, and rear wing and all that. But if it's something like side panels, things that are not really going to affect your core, vehicle dynamics, performances, and slow speed, don't worry about it. But make sure you get those done ultimately, because you need that. Ultimately you'll need that for your car. Now, after this is done, you also have the event preparation. And this starts way at the beginning. This starts at the beginning of your concept phase. Start with your design report. Document everything. Okay, this is one thing I can't stress enough. Document every single step of your journey, because you might not be able to show all of that in like a physical document, which you'll show to a judge, because no one really has time to look at all of that. But at least you will have an idea of what's happened. So once you have a layout of what's going on in your design phase, you'll be able to, you'll have an idea of what you actually did, because something you did 9 months ago might not be fresh in your mind. So you need to make sure you have all of that documented. Start your cost report after your final CAD is ready. Again, do this with a bit of, just make sure you have a little bit of tolerance here, because sometimes, even though you know how it's going to be manufactured, you might go to the machinist later and you'll figure out that it's not actually manufactured the way you expected. So you might have to tweak your cost report a bit if you don't want any penalties, unless of course you can support the way in which it's been manufactured. Anyhow, start your cost report early, because that's something which will really get on your nerves if you don't start it early enough. Rushing your cost report at the last minute is probably the most stressful thing you'll do in the static preparation of your season. Again, once your car is running, start with part testing. Okay, once you have part testing, uh, firstly it is like physical testing, stress analysis, 3-point bend test, whatever it is you do all of that. Even things like your chassis twist and all of that, get all of that done, because then you can add that to your design report as the first iteration. Then go to performance testing, right? So start testing your car's performance. Once all of that is set, again, go and reiterate your design report, add performance testing into that. And once you have all of that, you have a reasonably strong design report all set. Okay. Now, this is where your testing phase again comes into play, right? So you want to do a full car TI first. Make sure you do this, because if anything is going to give you peace of mind that you actually have a car that will pass TI, that could pass TI at the event. After this, start working on accelerations, the most simple event you can work on to start with right off the get-go, right? And then do skid pad setups. Once these two are done, do a mock cost event. I just threw it in here. You can do it whenever you want. But for this timeline, let's say, just do it over here, because by this point, you have a fully ready car. You know exactly how everything is manufactured. You have all the components on the car. you should be good to go to do a complete cost event. So do a mock cost event, with the team. Maybe team members who have already done it in the past can act as the cost judge, and then the junior team members, whoever's slightly new to the competition, can actually learn and hone their skills. So everybody's on the same page when you get to the event. Um, After this autocross setup, yeah, so start working on autocross. Again, by this point, you would actually want to do most of the score testing, at least on tarmac. If you have tarmac accessible in a safe environment in your university, that's perfect. But if you don't, then make sure you can actually arrange for a test track and you know what you have to do. Testing time is limited, kind of like Formula One, right? So you need to make sure you use your time wisely. Time is money here. Endurance, then work on endurance. Once that is done, update your design documents, because now you have a lot of testing data. You know what will happen in an endurance run. Maybe you can take some of this data, put it into your simulations again, verify, compare the results, get your error values ready. All of this can be done, but make sure you do this. It's all on paper, it looks all fancy, and it sounds like a lot of fun. But if you don't do this now, and if you write this down now and then you kind of leave it at the last minute and say, whatever, I'll cook up stuff before the event, it's going to cost you dearly. You will not win the design event if you do it that way. So make sure you set these milestones and you actually hit them. Then start intense endurance testing, like constantly do it. Don't overwork your engine, because trust me, there have been instances where we've done a lot of intense testing and sometimes our engine just completely gets messed up. Some events we did so much testing that the engine was kind of worn out, and we had to do a lot of replacement just before going to the event. So especially if you're using something like a turbo, right, just be very careful. But start with an intense endurance testing, limit it, but make sure you do some intense testing, because your drivers also have to get up to speed. It might seem very easy, but if your steering effort is very high, for example, that's going to affect your driver's stamina. If you have fresh tires, that's also going to make it more difficult to steer. So understand all of this. Once that's done, do a mock design event. By this point, you have everything ready for design. You have hardcore testing data, your design documents are all updated. You're all ready to give these things for printing and create these posters and stuff, or whatever support documents and support material you need for the design event. Start getting that ready at this point. After that, conduct a mock TI again, because do it as sort of like park firme. After your testing, after intense endurance, when you finish endurance in the event, you'll push it to park firme, right? Where the judges or the technical inspectors will just check the car once, making sure nothing is leaking and all the components are tightly fit. Do this so that at least you again have peace of mind that this is more or less going to be what will happen at the event. Then replace parts, extremely important. Don't do intense testing and then go with the same I don't know, rod ends or the same wheel hub, for example. There are instances where if you overwork the hub due to fatigue failure, it'll ultimately break. You won't know all of this without either doing some sort of an ultrasound test or actually replacing it. Replace your critical components, because that's really going to cost you otherwise. In hindsight, you're going to be completely demoralized if something bad happens at the event, right? Then update your design documents once again. If you're replacing parts, maybe take photos of your worn out parts. Can get you some brownie points in the event. Then again, endurance testing, but this time do it with the fresh parts just to get them up to speed, kind of. But do it with used tires. You don't want to waste any more of your fresh tires. You want to save them for the event, especially when you have your wet tires and you want a certain amount of tread depth. You need to make sure if you have old wet tires, that's the best thing to kind of use over here, because just to get the car running. Do final round of TI, statics and everything, print your support material, pack up, and you're ready to go. Right? So at this point, this is kind of what your entire timeline looks like. So once you have all of this, more or less, you should be ready to go, right? We can start off with event strategy. Well, apart from just event strategy, apart from just knowing what you're going to do in each day, you need to know what each team member is going to do. Okay. Human resource management at the event site is more important than anything else you do before the event. Go to the event, have a perfectly ready car, finish TI, everything. If you don't have any snags in that timeline, you don't have to worry about this too much. But that is utopian, right? You're rarely going to get to the event site and have a completely smooth event. Even the best teams will have to do at least something in their TI or change something. You're never. It's almost a fairy tale to have a perfect event. If you have that, then well, kudos to you. But chances are you're not going to have that. So you need to make sure you know where people are in the event site. So let's assume you have this is a track map with the locations of different access points in the 2020 Formula Bharat competition. Now, here there are different places where your car needs to go or your team members need to go. You have your dynamic areas, right? You have the dynamic events and also your testing area. And not necessarily hot pits, but you also have that engine testing area as well. So all of these are there. Then you have the static locations, you have a business plan location, you have a place for your design event, your cost event, usually in the same place, I guess. All of these are also there on the track, on the map. Then you have your pits. Obviously, you have your main pits over here where your car will be. But I've highlighted this section as well because, for example, you might have some electronics or batteries for your camera or whatever that you might store in your transport if you come by a car or you come by a bus and you're locking it safely wherever. Some of those things will be kept there because you really don't have too much space in the pits. If this is your first time going to an event, honestly, you don't have much space, and it's understandable. The garages are not that big, and you have a lot of teams, so you got to make do with whatever space you have. Something like a 12 feet by 12 feet. I'm not really sure, something like that. But you need to make sure you have all your space. You can fit everything in there, and it's going to be packed with like your tires and whatever little cabinets that you build and keep there. You're not going to have a lot of space. There's always going to be 2-3 people at the C cabin working on the engine. It's going to be someone in the front looking at brakes. So you're not really going to have a lot of space there. So some of the stuff has to be stored over here. Then you have the TI locations, right? You have your mechanical inspection, tilt test, all that. Sound noise test will be somewhere here. Brakes test. It'd be. So what I'm trying to tell you is there's so many locations all over the place. Fine. This is like, I know the longest distance between 2 points is almost something like 200, 300, maybe 400 or 500 meters. I'm not really sure, but it's quite a long distance. Okay, you don't want to keep running up and down. Of course, you'll have to keep running up and down, but everyone needs to know where everybody is. If you're going with a team of 40 people, things can get chaotic, and I'm telling you this from experience. You need to have need to have a plan of what you're going to do at the event site. So you have different types of people. For example, this is how I would perhaps organize it. You have one set of people in your team only solely focused on vehicle troubleshooting, whether it's at the TI bay or or you have to go somewhere to the pits or the engine testing area. There's always key members who are very who have high fidelity, who are very dexterous in working on the car. You need those sort of people constantly working on the car. So those are vehicle troubleshooting personnel. Then you have material info relay, people who are information relays, who will call from one place to another, call for certain components, might even physically have to run up and down carrying stuff. Pit maintenance, you need people at the pits. Never leave your pits completely empty, right? Because a lot of sensitive components, a lot of things lying around. You don't want it to just lie around, especially if it's something very expensive, right? TI and dynamic tests, people who are always with the car. This also includes your tallest driver. So these people by default going to be TI. Make sure that people who really know the rule book inside out, right? Everyone should know the rule book, but there are always going to be a few team members who are excessively good at it. Those people, you want them as TI personnel, people who are going to be with the car. Scouts. Unfortunately, you might not always have everything that you need at the event site. You should be in a position where you do, but sometimes you'll need to borrow something from another team, or out of the goodwill of another team, they would have to lend you a component. Of course, it builds the spirit of the competition. But the point is, you'll always need someone who might have to go and look. Scouts can also include people who are involved with partnerships, branding, the corporate team who might need to go around talking to different sponsors or different teams, or networking. So all of these come under scouts. So you need to have these personnel as well. Now, let's see how you can maybe organize these people into your event site. The material info and relay personnel are going to be kind of the heart of the entire system. So they're going to have information going from TI to dynamic tests. Maybe you're at TI and the TI inspector says, you need an extra bolt or a nut over here. If you can bring it in a couple of minutes, we can continue with the TI. Otherwise, you need to go back. You don't want to go back because then you have to wait in the line. So there's going to be constant phone calls. Like I've gone to like 5 different events in undergrad. So I know this for a fact. There's always going to be a lot of chaos. TI people are always going to be on the phone with material info relay. Now, you might not have network, might not have very good network at the event site. So make sure you have, if you can use radios, but obviously use it within legal limits, because there are some restrictions with using radios. Also get in touch with the event organizers so you know exactly what protocols to follow for that. Have maybe a radio on site between these five different, at least one person in each of these five categories. Also have phones network constantly connected. I don't know if you all have Discord, have that be on a constant voice call. Doesn't hurt. So all the information is going to go through material info. So if TI and dynamic test people need something, they call the material info and relay. These people have to coordinate with the pits, because it's the first place you want to go if you have your components there, right? So this is information. That's why it's dotted line. This is like radio messages. This is physical movement. So info, material info, and relay. Info is one thing, but relaying the materials as well. So you need to go back and forth. Get the most athletic, the most energetic people in the team for this. Obviously, don't put them there forever. Cycle all these team personnel. Okay, cycle everyone, but have a plan and make sure everyone sticks to this. That's another thing. Having all this is ready, but if people don't stick to it, your event's going to go up in flames. So be careful. Scouts. Now, if the pits people don't have something, let's say material info and relay calls the pits. They say, I need this spanner. And for some reason, the pits, they can't find the spanner and they need to borrow it from another team. You don't want the pit maintenance people to go away because they have to stay there. That's when the scouts come into play. These are people who are going to be constantly going around the event site. Scouts are also responsible for getting information, listening to announcements, the works. So you need to call them. They can go get stuff. And don't send the scout to TI and Dynamics directly, because that's again going to cause a problem. You're not having a chain of command. So what happens is you miss out on some information. Maybe some components already gone there. Either way, scout has to bring it to the pits, and from there, material info and relay will take it to the dynamic tests. In all of this, vehicle troubleshooting can be doing multiple other tasks. They might be really good and dexterous in getting stuff done on the car, but they might not necessarily be part of the TI group. So they'll also be around the pitch, perhaps. Sometimes they'll say, we need the guy who we need someone who can reach the C cab in this area. Can you call this person? So the relay guy has to go. Relay person has to call the vehicle troubleshooting personnel and send them either to TI Dynamics or to the pits sometimes if the car is stationed at the pits. So again, this is a really rough process flow. The different ways to go about this, but what I'm trying to tell you is there's a lot that goes on at the events. It's not as good. It's not just about creating a design and manufacturing your car and being good to go. There are so many. In fact, this is actually a beautiful topic and subject to look into. I don't know. I feel like maybe this is something that's often overlooked. But from my personal experience, if you trust my judgment, this is very important. Organize your team, and it doesn't have to be like one person is in charge and the boss. There's no such thing as a boss in an FS team. Okay, but there are different people who have different responsibilities. More often than not, if the team leads, subsystem leads, or fourth years, and the final year students are the ones who are organizing and managing things, get them stationed. One person will be in charge of the material info relay people, one person for the pits. This is how a company, a structure also develops, so that information moves across. If you don't have communication protocols, everything is going to start collapsing. Now, have an event strategy. Let's say you want to finish your car. Let's say your car is completely done with TI. Go to the testing area, change your vehicle setup, get your car running, make sure it's all good. Go to skid pad, set up the car for skid pad, go there, finish skid pad, maybe then reduce your tire pressures. It's easier to do that, right? Instead of having to fill your tires, go to skid pad and then immediately leak out some some air from the tires. Immediately take it to acceleration. You need some lower tire pressure for acceleration so you get more traction in the rear. Don't worry too much about rolling resistance and all that, but I won't get into technical details. This is one way you can do it. Then wrap it up. Keep your car in the pits. Don't worry too much about it. Maybe in the middle, you need to take it for cost event or design event. Factor these things in. Next day, go for testing, change your vehicle setup, go for autocross, prep your vehicle for design finals. Maybe after autocross, you want to bring it back, tape some things down, make it look a little better. Take it for design finals. Very ambitious, but if you really know you're going to be in design finals, factor this in and it'll help you. Next day, change your vehicle setup, get prepared, get pumped up, go for endurance, nail the event and potentially win, right? Understand what's going to happen every single day. Have a timetable every single day. You're not going to the event to chill and have fun. That's one of the objectives, and a very important objective. If you're not enjoying yourself at the event, what's the point? But there's a functional set of objectives you need to reach. Do all of this and you'll have a great event. But this is, of course, in the case that you would have a physical event. And I hope this is particularly useful for both teams that have been in the events for a long time and teams that have not yet gone for an event. You can start off by doing stuff like this. It's good practice, and over the years you'll get better and better. Go for multiple competitions, and you will eventually get better. Now consider delays, right? Multiple TI attempts, unforeseen breakdowns. I know everybody wants to go finish TI, have fun at the events, and just go for all the dynamics. Unfortunately, it's not always going to happen, right? Probability says that it's not going to happen. So consider delays, unforeseen breakdowns. Again, you might have to take it to some workshop outside in the track where you'll have to weld it. So weld something that's broken. Consider all of this. Include static events into your plan, right? I've only put dynamics here, but statics is half of the stuff. So you need to make sure you focus on that. Stick to your communication protocols. I cannot emphasize on this enough. If you don't do this, if there's someone who's not getting information that they need to be getting at a specific time, things are going to get ugly. So make sure you know what's happening, especially if you're a key member who needs to know almost all the information that's going on in order to organize the next set of steps for the team. Make sure you follow protocols. So on that note, let me conclude with this presentation. Some things you need to understand. Construct a season timeline, include financial requirements, extremely important in the beginning. Add leeway. Your first timeline is seldom realistic. Trust me, you'll start off the timeline and say, I want to finish all these things. And by, I'll start today, 3 months down the line, I'll have a test car ready to test, and I'll test it like crazy for 3 months, and I'll nail the event. That is going to be, those are going to be castles you build in your mind. Make sure you add leeway to your timeline. Make something realistic. Spend a couple of days, spend a whole week, work with your team and do this. Do this in the break between your competition, maybe at the end of your season, right? When the new team is forming. Consider manufacturing delays, start manufacturing early. Very important. Okay. That's why, again, it's critical that you finish that final iteration phase and you finish the final CAD assembly on the dot. All those processes have to be on the money. Otherwise, your manufacturing is more often than not going to be delayed a lot. Trust me, if you plan a 2 month manufacturing, you're going to take 3 months for a fact. So make sure you factor that in. Start static preparation early. If there's one place where you can earn points, it's in the statics. Not too sure about cost, but definitely design, you can earn a lot of points despite having a car that is perhaps not fully ready to run. And business also, you don't really need a running car for that. You can win the business event without even having the car fully ready. So start this early. There are no excuses for missing deadlines or not hitting the mark. These are things which you can work a lot on, and the sooner you start this, the more you can develop it, because these are a lot of things that require imagination and a lot of different angles and a lot of research. Start this early. Okay. Have a contingency plan for timeline offsets. Again, like I've told before, team strength variance. Okay, you start off with 40, 50. You start off with 50 people in the beginning of the season. Don't expect all 50 to be there in the last day of the season when you're going for your final event. It's not going to happen. There are always going to be some people who will need to drop out for certain reasons. Okay, but that's not an excuse for you to not have a plan. Have a contingency plan for the next day. If this team member is no longer part of the team, what am I going to do? Make sure responsibilities are better distributed and everyone knows what is going on. Have weekly meetings, have contingency plans. And if you're planning on, if you're someone who maybe you're not able to focus full time and you might not be able to commit to your tasks after a certain point, give notice well in advance so that the team can adjust their timelines. Very important. Financial constraints, right? We always say don't give financial constraints as an excuse for not designing a component. Design it virtually if you can, but understand that you can't make everything that you plan because money is also a factor. Consider these constraints, and if you follow all of these points, I hope you nail your season and you do a good job. But of course, this is all subjective. These are just my opinions. On that note, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your time. I'm really happy to do this. I've had a lot of years to kind of uh, consume and kind of assimilate everything that I've learned, and I've tried to put all of this in a nutshell over here. So I hope this helps you all. I hope this was informative. If anything, I hope this was worth your time for the past half an hour, 45 minutes. On that note, I'm open to questions. Thank you so much.
I actually, Saiduth, with one of the points that you mentioned, something that came up, especially at the competition, where people really don't realize like how expansive, like how huge it is, and there's just so much going on and so many things going on. There was one point that came up, that something that I learned is that new members aren't, or new members on your team, the junior members aren't necessarily aligned with what to expect at the competition. And it often comes that they come there and then they're completely, totally blank. They have absolutely no clue what's going on, right? They don't know they're the static events. They don't know they're the dynamic events, driver meets. So something that I learned as team captain was, which I learned from another team, is having, when you go to the competition, before the day begins, you have a briefing. So you tell them what the events are for the day, where events are going to happen. And then at the end of the event, you have a debrief, like of the day. Every day, a brief and a debrief. If something went wrong, who's going to fix it, what is everybody's role. I think you covered that in the part where you said that you have separate departments on your team that will be ensuring certain things. But yeah, think about your new members, because your junior members are completely blank when they come to their first competition. They don't know what to expect.
Yeah, I agree with that. It brings back memories as well. You know, when we went for when I was leading the team for our first competition of the season, yeah, a lot of junior members were not too sure of what to expect, and we didn't have a we. And I remember, you know, every day we have a lot of chaos going on in the track. Seldom straightforward, right? It's always running around. We go back to the hotel room and we have like this 2 hour debrief just sitting. Everyone's
Yeah.
exhausted, but it has to be done because the next day people have to wake up after 2 hours of sleep and go back.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Fun days, right? So sorry, we have a few questions. I think one was from Siddesh. Sorry, I'm not muted. Yeah. Siddesh Nerukar. Any recommendations for a team mostly having mechanical engineering students and aiming for an EV setup? And then we'll move on to Rasmi.
Okay. Team with mechanical engineering for an EV setup. I mean, there's no reason why you shouldn't take part. Of course, you know, everything is going EV now, so there is a point where all of Formula student is probably going to shift to EV. I'm not too sure, but suggestions. See, honestly, I've not worked in an EV team before, and I haven't worked hands-on in EV cars yet, so I don't know too much about that. But see, there are so many forums, right? Especially if you're a new team, FSA has a lot of forums, right? So you know, start looking into those forums. And one key rule when you post on forums, don't just ask, right? Don't just type in and say, I want this. How do I design an EV electric vehicle? It's not the right way to do it. So what you can do is first have an understanding of how to go about the process. Watch some of these videos. There are great videos by, you know, Pat and Cloud covering basics of design. Once you get an idea of how to go about designing an FSA car, you start working on stuff. Whenever you have a doubt in designing a specific component, go to the forums, introduce yourself, tell what you've done, maybe mention some values and numerical things that you've included, and then ask for an opinion or ask for how someone else would go about it. Right? Be very careful in the way you ask things. Never ask for direct answers. Everybody is in their own journey of learning. So I think my first recommendation for you would be obviously understand EV tractive systems. It's not like a powertrain system, right? I mean, it's not like a combustion system. So it will be good if you can get some people who do have some electrical knowledge on board, because when you start dealing with things like batteries, and you know, your regulators and everything, your motors, making designs based on all that, you need to make sure those members know it. So even if you're a pure mechanical engineering team, make sure you can identify people who are strong in electric vehicles or strong in electrical concepts, because like I said in the beginning, get members who are strong in specific topics, who are interested in those topics, so to work on that department. Otherwise, they won't stick till the end.
Yeah, and also if I have to add to that, recruiting new members is always, very difficult, especially when you have to go above and beyond your area. Like you're used to having or recruiting in your mechanical department. Now you have to go to another department, whether if you have an electrical department on the team. And I think how you start doing that is, as Saiduth mentioned, figure out what is actually required in the electrical powertrain for your EV, right? And then basically create a presentation, approach the professors in the electrical department, ask them if you can get 5 minutes of if they can give you 5 minutes of their time that you can present to one of their classes that they're teaching. And then, you'll have people that will join you if they really are interested. It is always difficult to get new people on board, but again, to move outside your zone might this might be one of the approaches that you could try out. I think we can move on to Rashmi. Rashmi, would you like to go
Yeah.
ahead?
Yeah, hi, I'm from Steyr Racing, and this question is kind of towards the whole COVID situation and the event. So recently, I've observed this pattern that almost every second person is either losing someone or testing positive. And by the Gantt chart, we make it according to the plan, like the whole year plan, and everything goes without this constraints, right? And every time I'm following up with someone, like, what, by this week you were supposed to submit this, but it isn't done. So they give me these reasons that's completely genuine. I understand that, but then with this, the entire timeline is moving back. So do you have anything which can help us with this? Because I've been observing this the last 1 month working. So
Yeah, honestly, it is a very unfortunate time in the world for everybody. Everything is unstable, and yeah, you just need to kind of stay strong in that sense. It's very sad that a lot of yeah, it's the whole situation is bad, right? And how do you create a contingency plan for something like this? There's no right way to specifically create an action plan, because it's not like plan B, plan C. It was always like plan, Y, plan Z. It's you need to firstly understand that management is, you can do your job in terms of management, getting your documents ready, representing your team, talking to sponsors, being answerable for everything your team does to the university, all of that. But the biggest challenge in management is getting others to do the tasks. That is the most difficult part, making sure that other team members are reaching their deadlines. Because at the end of the day, it all comes back to you when you're managing. You will be the one who'll have to answer to everybody as to why the car is not ready. In this case, of course, because it's still virtual, um, see, I understand there are genuine reasons. It's very difficult. You need to kind of accept that and see how you can work around those situations. So, for example, if there's a team member who's not able to do a certain component, you're waiting on let's say, the brakes design to be ready before you can move forward, because only then you can package that into the wheel hub, the upright assembly. Um, and if that member is for some reason not able to reach that target, you need to see how you can expand your design around that. uh, Sometimes you'll have to push that design later on and make that as a lower priority, right? For example, you might need to say, okay, brakes design is no longer a priority. We need to have a rough idea of it, give a little bit of leeway, this much space, and then move on with the rest of the design. uh, Honestly, it's a very broad question, so I can't give it, because every single instance would be very specific to that. But right now, in terms of managing the team and getting the morale up, use different platforms, catch up with your team once a week. It doesn't always have to be about design. It doesn't have to be about deadlines and meeting targets. It's not a class, right? It is a simulation of a company, yes, but you're all team members at the end of the day. Get together, catch up online once a week, have have calls on Discord or Slack or whatever platform you use. Rally up the team. It doesn't have to be give these deadlines and give me the report the next week. You need to kind of guide them and work with them in these times. I hope that kind of answers your question. I know it's a very vague answer, but it's kind of uncertain, the whole situation.
yeah, it answered. Thank you.
Thanks, Rashmi. I think we'll move on to Kashyap. I do want to mention there are a couple of members who have messaged in the chat box. I suggest if you raise your hand, so then you can ask out your question directly. Kashyap,
Hello,
please
ma'am.
go ahead.
Ma'am,
Yes.
am I audible?
Yes.
Ma'am, so basically our question was that since the competition will be happening almost after 2 years physically, there is a high likelihood that the team is only composed of members that have not attended any offline event. So how do we plan for that physical event?
Saiduth, would you like to answer, or would you like me to go ahead?
I mean, you can answer first, and I'll add stuff later.
Sure. Okay. So Kashyap, it's a very good question, and I think a lot of teams are facing this very issue right now. Is that many of them have their seniors who have graduated from the team, and literally the team is starting from scratch. I think the first very important thing is keeping very close to your alumni, getting your alumnus involved with you during this entire phase, from critiquing you on your design, or if you decided to go with FP 2020, that vehicle, then critiquing you then on your timeline, then when your car is being manufactured and when you have your rolling car ready, getting them involved in that process to do maybe a rough ti, to go over how it actually is at the competition, and then also getting them to brief you of what the competition experience is like, what issues they faced, which vendors have they connected with in the past, any logistics they have used in the past. I think in order to ensure that your team, if it's a legacy team, as in a team that has had many years of running, to not start from scratch, you need to keep your alumnus very close, keep them informed, get them to be your mentors. That's the very first thing. The second one is, Saiduth has mentioned this before, making sure that your vehicle is rules compliant. So understand the rules book in and out. If you're not sure, send in an email. But making sure that your vehicle is rules compliant will already sort of give you success at the event, because you're going to pass tech if your vehicle is rules compliant, right? If you've gotten positive feedback from your photo submissions and from your video submissions, all good. I think is and the third one is getting the testing timeline right. So as Saiduth mentioned, there much before the event, you need to start getting your vehicle tested. Now, if you are running a previous year car, a second year vehicle, which is Formula Bharat 2020 vehicle, then as soon as your college opens, and if you've not had a chance to get to your college for a long time, I think you have to like clean shop, figure out what is required on the vehicle, and try to get it on the track on a testing venue as soon as possible. Get your driver training down. The amount of testing you can get is good. Get your new members to start focusing on making spare parts for for your vehicle, so that if once you get at the competition, so they get that manufacturing experience, which a lot of new members would have not had until now, right? Because you've been virtual for pretty much all this time. And then if you are building a car this year, let's say you're lucky, you're available, I mean, you have permission to build a new car at your shop, right? Then make sure your car is at least ready, like, okay, realistically 2 months, but idealistically 3 months before the competition. It gives you enough time for your car to break, for you to fix it, for you to get driver training in, and to get the number of hours down there. So I think if you work on this strategy that I've mentioned, I think it will really help you. You're going in as a new team, so you'll see a lot of things that are, even if you're prepared, there will be things that will be thrown at you. But the thing is that it's important to at least have that backup preparation done, so that you're prepared for majority of the common hurdles that everybody faces. Sorry, Saiduth, you can go ahead. I
Yeah, in addition to your points, Kathy, I think I mean, I just thought of this as an idea. Let's say, okay, by good fortune, everybody's able to, get vaccinated, and let's say, lockdowns are lifted, and you can actually go to the lab and, you know, uh, start working on your manufacturing. Maybe if it might be in a state where it's so late that you wouldn't be able to physically make a car for this upcoming event. One thing is, if you have the funds to spare, that's a good way to practice. But in terms of, let's say your team doesn't have anybody who has actually worked on the car, maybe you can set up like a webcam in your lab or something. Have like a Discord page or a Discord server or a Slack server or something. Use your college Wi-Fi or whatever, and live stream your manufacturing the whole time. Whenever seniors are available, they can join the Discord call, put it as a on their screen, like at the side, look at it. Maybe once in a while you can ask questions dynamically. At this point, it's like when push comes to shove, you need to think of anything you can to understand how to design. Maybe also by doing that, it's a good way to document that built the car, it's going to be terabytes of data if you're going to record everything. But if that's a way for you to that's a way to build a database, then maybe try that. Do a live stream every time someone's in the lab, and whoever's available on Discord whenever they're free can join the VC and watch it and give suggestions.
Valid point. So we've got a question from Shubham Rao. Can you please expand a bit more on protocols, or maybe provide an example of where it may be beneficial?
Shubham, is he in the Zoom call?
Yeah, Shubham, if you're in the Zoom call, can you expand a bit more on your question? Oh, sorry, Sai, that I muted you by accident.
Hello.
Yes, Shubham, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Shubham from ID Roorkee Motorsports. Actually, I was trying to ask. I came across this point in FSCV documents as well. Like we should have protocols in place, but I wasn't exactly sure as to what protocols and for what things and what situations do we need to have protocols. So this I was trying to ask when it when it would prove helpful to have some protocols in place for things and like that. An example as such would be.
Okay, let's say you're in the TI bay and you have a front wing on your car, okay, and for some reason it is maybe one of the wires or whatever that you're using to suspend it is too loose, okay, and your front wing is drooping too much, but only that specific member knows exactly what to do on the car. Okay, it's a very specific situation. It should be in a position where when you call the pits or you call your relay or whoever, you can track the member. You know where every single person is on the event site. It's almost like a GPS without having GPS. It fully runs on trust that each person is at their designated location. So if you cannot find a person who knows that specific rule or can actually fix that component, you're going to have to go back from the TI bay. You wouldn't be able to fix it on the spot within 30 seconds, right? And then your whole event gets offset by half a day, 1 day maybe, if there are many teams that are waiting in the TI line. Okay, there's no leapfrogging or anything, right? That's just one example. I'll go for a more specific example. What if you have like an electrical problem? Something has to be fixed in the electrical side, but you don't know where the electrical team member is. That's a very niche subject which only the electrical and electronics people will know. So in such a situation, you will need to know where that person is, right? Or if it's a powertrain, or if it's something specific to brakes, only the brake person actually knows how to bleed it properly. So many situations. So these are situations where you need a protocol in terms of communication protocol between team members. See, ultimately, if everybody knows where every single person is just by looking at a timetable, apart from auxiliary things like maybe one person will have to go to the restroom or have to go drink some water or eat something, all of that is fine. But apart from that, you should still know where every single person is, right? It's the event. I know, especially if it's your first time in an FS event, it's surreal. You feel like you're finally at a racetrack and you're going to take your car on track and you're all excited. So obviously that in that adrenaline, you shouldn't get distracted and just walk away. These are things that I've seen. Okay, because I've seen this, I've tried to create these protocols. I'll tell you one more thing. Even if you create all these protocols, add leeway in that as well. Even if you create protocols, not everybody, like 15-20% will not follow it entirely. It's just the way it is. It's not about being demoralizing. It's not about saying people are bad. It's just statistically not possible for everybody to follow it. There are always exceptions. So this is why protocols are important. Just an example. I hope this is what you mean by protocols, because if it's something more technical, then I'm not too sure.
I think you also, if I'm not wrong, you also were trying to refer to FSCV, which is team management protocols. So another area where protocols are very helpful is in how your team operates, team meetings, when they happen, what time they happen, who's taking meeting minutes, communication protocols. How does communication happen within the team? Is it how's the structure of communication? Is it team captain with every single member? Is it team captain with the leads and then leads with the members? Protocols on your shop operation times and how your shop operates. Who is in charge for what? I think if you have set protocols, what that helps is it provides a guideline, and it just helps anyone who's new joining your team understand how the team operates. And having a way of how your team operates really gives a lot of structure. And as Saiduth mentioned, where, who's responsible for what, and what the hierarchy and what the structure is. So I hope that answered your question, Shubham. We'll
Yeah,
move.
sure. Thank you.
Great,
Thanks a lot.
great, thank you. We'll move on to Satya. He says, how do we train the new recruits to get at par with the team with everything being virtual? I think we answered this, right, Saiduth? About getting in touch with this. So we'll move on to Muskan. Yes, so it's almost the same thing, but as this year, this time the competition was virtual. So due to the current situation, we haven't had frequent physical meetings with the team. Can you provide tips and guidance regarding how to deal with this drawback?
Uh, yeah, so like I mentioned, use a platform where you can all network together. It's no longer, honestly, I don't think making a Zoom meeting every single time or having a Google Meet every single time is feasible, because you need to set up the meeting and invite people, and it doesn't really feel like a structure. Now, I don't know whether in a professional Zoom suit or whatever you can actually you know schedule things and create groups, but use a platform like Slack. Slack is something that a lot of teams, startups, even companies use, and many teams as well. It's a good platform for sharing documents, having channels, having a proper structure for everything. If your team is full of gamers, people who game a lot, you'd be familiar with Discord, which is again a very good platform for networking and talking. You can just jump into like a voice channel stream. It's very straightforward without the hassle of having to create a meeting link and invite people. And you can have like multiple people joining multiple rooms. It's kind of like that, the networking camp around the campfire networking thing that we had, right? Few months ago. It's like that, but obviously you're not physically moving around, but it's a great way to talk and network, right? I would personally suggest, especially when it's recruits, one problem which I've seen happen over the course of time is when new recruits come, they don't interact enough with alumni. Okay, they talk to the current senior members, experienced team members, and mentors or whoever is training them in their subsystem, but they seldom get time to actually interact with alumni. My suggestion would be create a Discord or a Slack server with your entire team, like the history of your team, legacy, whatever. Whoever is interested in still being in touch and working, get all of them on board, right? Talk to them. If you need help, especially in these sort of times where it's very uncertain if someone's available or not for working, maybe you can, as a team captain or project manager, whoever's in charge of organizing these things, make the alumni also kind of like a team member, right? Just because they're alumni doesn't mean they don't need to listen or something. Involve them and say, okay, the protocol is, can you train this recruit? Can you talk to them once a week and give me an update on what they've learned? I'm pretty sure there'll be alumni members who are more than happy to help in that way. Um, Obviously, they're not going to work on the car or attend the event, right? Because you're not allowed to. But at least having an alumni network, there's nothing unethical or against the rules in getting them to help you in developing the team. As long as they don't do the design, it's ethically right. So that's something you can try out.
Yeah, and on that same point, I think if I'm not mistaken, Pravega Racing has these podcasts that they have with their alumni and the team, and I think that's a great option if you want to have a Zoom call like this, where where you have an alumni come on, and then you invite all your team members to join in and find out their story, ask questions. I think that's also a great way to go about things, and yeah. Actually, there's a question from Satya asking, what is the platform you are using to create this PowerPoint?
Oh, Microsoft PowerPoint.
There you
I'm
go.
telling you, it's way more powerful than you think. There's so much you can do. PowerPoint, Word, and Excel, right? Whatever you've done till now in school or whatever is like it's nothing. It's like a small little drop in that entire ocean. There's so much more you can do in it. Just I'm not going to tell you how to do it. It's actually very
to give a
straightforward.
course on that, an
Just
intermediate course.
play around with animations, morph tools, and all these 3D objects I'm using, right? There's a whole 3D database in PowerPoint. It's actually very easy to use, and it looks quite good as well. That's a tip. That's a tip.
Yeah, I think you should include this in your business presentation session later on, uh, or just if you'd like to have a session on that. It is actually true, because even Google Slides is quite powerful as well. You just don't know that you can morph a lot of objects and make it look really cool. Something I learned like last year. We have one question from Siddesh again. He asked in so his thing is like, basically they have never attended a live event, right? His entire they've just heard stories from their seniors, and the situation currently right now is go with your gut ability and not break down while you're at it. So is there any session, any phase side that you have mentioned where that your team has had like a breakdown, as in maybe a breakdown in communications, maybe a breakdown in, maybe there's been like a huge argument and your entire team was like on the verge of falling apart, which actually happens for everyone. We've all had our stories, but I think Siddesh wanted to know, like, is there a specific area and how you probably dealt with it?
Um, I don't want to get into any specifics because, see, every time, especially when you get into your final year, irrespective of what position, whether you're a technical lead, a subsystem lead, or you're taking care of the management side, administrative, there's always going to be problems. Okay, I see, because I've experienced it as well. There's a lot of difficulty in communications, and I think I also saw some of these other management videos that we've had on Formula Bharat channel, with Monash and everybody. There also they were talking about how egos is a big problem. There's a lot of clash in egos, right? Because especially if you all join as first year recruits and you learn, and you're so excited. When I get into fourth year, I want to try these sort of things. If I'm part of R&D, I want to try to implement these sort of things. And by the time you reach fourth year, right, your relationships and your friendships and all are very different, because when you reach a managing position where you need to take the call of deciding how things go. See, it shouldn't be autonomous. It's not like only the fourth year sit and decide the season. That's wrong. You need to have everybody on board. But the final call obviously relies on the team leads, right? All the 10, 12 members, how many ever are there on fourth year. That's where you realize every single person has a different agenda. Some will know that the whole car is a common goal. Some would feel that their subsystem hasn't been improved a lot over time. They want to spend some more funds and more time in that. I want 3 more team members working on this. We don't want that subsystem anymore. We are already peak in that subsystem. Your team is already known for that. Let's do this. All of this will happen. Okay. I'm not trying to. I've had an excellent time with my team. It's been a great experience. But obviously, when you're in the zone, there are a lot of problems you'll face. Luckily for me now, I've had three years of time to kind of think back and retrospectively look at what I've done and how I've learned. But in terms of specific examples, I won't get into a detail of any example because there are a lot of different ones, but you can over different times. But the most common, I think, like I told you, is at the event site. That's where things get messy. You might think you have a perfect car and you have a perfect design and your statics are all set, right? Uh, don't withhold information. That's what I've learned. If there's some problem in certain parts of some documentation or something, don't wait till the last minute and tell the team that something is wrong here and this is going to cost us here, or I'm sorry, I forgot to bring this component. I didn't tell it till now. I'm scared you'll yell at me. Don't think of all those things. So you need to be very honest and straightforward. Something that I've learned. Also, because at the end of the day, don't try to like protect people by not telling bad information, because ultimately they will have to find out somehow that something is penalized in your team, and you need to have it'll be a lot worse. Okay, I'm just telling you that right off the bat. Communication protocols, that's something that I've struggled with a lot. It's something I try to emphasize every single event that I went in as a team captain, but it never always works perfectly. So it's something you need to start. You start doing it. If your team doesn't have protocols at the team side, start working on that until people get used to it. At least then the first year team member, 3 years down the line, when they're in fourth year, they know, okay, this is what we need to do. And it refines over time. It's not something that snaps. It's just like a design. It takes you 3-4 years to make a really good car.
Really good points. Ego does play a huge role in a lot of tensions on the team. So I think that is something to keep in check. We do have a question, two questions, but that came in. But there was a YouTube question that came in quite a bit away from Neil. How exactly is FBV different from FP? It's obviously FBV is virtual and Formula Bharat is an on-site event. And at Formula Bharat Virtuals, you're just going to have the statics, which is engineering design and business, and your engineering design is actually submitted an engineering design presentation, not a report like how you have to do at the competition. At the same time, you're working with a team that is mostly concept based, so if you get a lot of members also who are interested in just design, this is the great time to get them on board. You can work on some really good ideas that would be implemented in your on-site competition vehicle for the next season. So I hope that answered your question. So let's take in a question from Purti. Sometimes the team gets messy in our work. How can we motivate ourselves? And how can we check that we're going the right path or right plan that we're going on? Purti, can you unmute yourself? Because I don't think I want to understand, or we want to understand, what does messy in our work mean? Is that chaos? Is that chaotic?
Yes.
Or... Yes,
Am I
Purti, go
audible?
ahead. Yes.
Okay, ma'am. My question was that since when we go, we have a certain plan for the weekly plan or the monthly plan. So sometimes the team members or some team members do not work properly, or also our plans do not work properly. So this is the messy meaning in my question. So how can we at that time we think that yes, if we do not do this thing, then we'll lose the uh, event and we will not do good work. So how can we motivate ourselves in that situation that yes, we can do better in the next time? And how can we check also that we have a certain plan for the team? Okay, so how can we check that this plan is correct and how yes, this plan will work correctly? Since we are not experienced, we are the first year team, so we do not have much experience. So how can we motivate ourselves like yes, we have good plan, we will achieve our aim and objective. So this was my question. I hope you got my point.
uh, I guess it in terms of knowing whether you're doing the right thing or not, the only way you're really going to know is if you try it, right? I mean, nothing was invented in the first shot. It always takes multiple failures. I know it's a very cliched and very like standard, repeated statement of things are never built immediately. But see, that is just, you need to trust your gut feeling and do it. Work on something. The only way you're going to know if what you're doing is right or wrong is by doing it once and seeing whether you're able to complete the task, right? Now, in addition to that, you were talking about how maybe some team member is not doing that to go ahead and do that. After that, have a word. If it's something that you can solve technically, solve it. Otherwise, get them in touch with the alumni. And if you're a new team, then just go ahead with it. Okay. And if you're really concerned of whether your design or whatever you're going to do will work or not, try to find the answer in forums, because more often than not, if you spend enough time in search, you can definitely find something that's already there. But if it's something very specific, make sure, like I told you, post it on the forums, but tell them exactly what you've done, right? It's a give and take situation. It's not like Google. You can't just go and ask for answers. You provide something, they provide something. That's how it works, the system. So you provide the data that you've created. I've done this, these are things I've learned. Somebody else might learn from that. They'll be like, oh, this is another way to do it. And someone else will come and say, okay, it's good that you've done this work. I would suggest looking at this. Why don't you look at this document? I've created a basic design before. Some people are nice enough to share their design. So that is the way it works. So don't question your judgment too much. You need to try. Only then you'll know whether you'll fail or not. I would say do it for smaller components or designs. In terms of motivating team members, like I told, a lot of things are there. You can just have weekly meetings. Connect with your team members at a human level. Don't just look at everybody as different objects that are doing their tasks. We're not computers. right? At the end of the day, it's about building an A team, right? How many times has Cloud told that? It's about building an A team and then an A car, because an A team can still actually get to the podium even with a C car. It's possible.
Yeah, good point. So we'll take this one last question from Ravi Teja. You always want your juniors or freshers to do more than you did when you are on the team, and this in turn out to be more learning more than you did at the same time. So, are there any tips that you have for training juniors? Would be helpful listening both of your opinions. Saidit, uh,
So what was the first part again? It was second part
he
is about training juniors. So
it's the same thing, like how you, I think it's the expectation of them doing more than what you did on the team, so sort of like
hmm,
on the
yeah.
growth perspective.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the end goal is obviously every successive team has to do better than the previous team, right? You're only doing the right job if you do better than your alumni. It's as simple as that. And when you pass out of the team, you need to make sure that the juniors do better than you. Otherwise, the team is not going to grow. Okay. So in terms of training team members, again, get your alumni and everybody really onto like a common platform where you can share documents, information, just have voice chats, video conferences, anything. And like I said, Slack, Discord. I mean, I personally I keep saying Discord because I really like the interface. It's very straightforward. It's not really as I feel like Slack is a bit too organized in terms of into a point where it's difficult to really properly communicate. It's more of a storage thing. Same with Trello. Trello is a good platform for kind of organizing your documents. So integrate Trello with Slack, but then use something like Discord for just casually catching up with people, right? It's a great place to network and give a lot of information. So that would be my take on it, just network.
Yeah, and to add on that point, I think it's very important for each team every year after each competition to update their lessons learned. It's like this binder. We used to have it as a hard copy. You can have nowadays soft copies are very there. So you either have a common drive on your folder where you put in all your lessons learned from that competition season, from design, team management, cost, financial, sponsorship. This really helps the next year team to see where the errors that you had made. So keeping a lessons learned binder really helps future teams to see what worked and what didn't work in the past, right? Because not every time, sometimes alumni may just not be available. Their work takes over their entire time, and they may just not be available to share that key information, or they might even not remember. And I think that's when documentation and having this lessons learned binder, it's like a holy grail that you pass from one team to the next, and I think that is very important. I think the other important thing, and it's very important to emphasize this, is that each team should realize what they're working towards. You're working towards a competition with a set number of points. Whatever you do in your design, in your team management, in your financials, all of that have to be working towards getting or maximizing the number of points. You do want your juniors to do better than you. For sure, that's a great thing, but it's always important to remind them that they're working towards getting those number of points. Often times when you say that you want them to excel and your expectations are really high, there's that extra pressure to add in fancy things, and then the important concept of trying to get to actually, you know um what you're preparing for is what is the competition that falls apart. So I think it's very important to remind them as to what they're going towards. They can always leave if a certain section is good, perhaps you can just leave it for 1 year, just understand why your seniors made that design, and maybe make a design change somewhere else where it is going to get you more points. So it's very important to remember that while you're telling them to grow, is to keep that main underlying objective is that you're working towards a competition with a set number of points, and so anything new that you do, even in terms of growth, is towards getting more points. Yeah, I think, Saidat, did you want to add? to that, or
Yeah, no, yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's about just documentation. So as long as you have either a binder or everything stored somewhere, Drive or Trello or wherever, as long as there's just a flow of what has been done. Yeah, alumni might not always have time. As time goes on, their careers also grow and they get more and more busy. But as long as there's a more casual way to also network with them, that works. Facebook groups used to be big a long time back. Now I'm not really sure how many people are active on Facebook, so maybe you'd want to look at other options where you can network a little easier. See, the thing with management is, like I told you all start working in the team together. By the time you reach management levels, irrespective of how idealistic you are as a person or how smooth the team has been developed, there are always going to be ego clashes. Okay. What you really need to do is firstly, after that season is done, reconcile, think a little bit about the things you've learned, because ultimately you're doing all of this to build yourself up, to build your skills for life, right? And management is a very important part. It's perhaps it's soft skills, right? It's technical. Someone can be a perfect designer, but unless they know how to communicate and work with a team, they're never going to be able to grow. What I'm saying is, don't let these egos destroy your relationships and friendships with the people who you work with. Don't don't sign off on like a bad note or something and just say the season was chaotic and this just doesn't work for me. After your season, take time, take some breathing space, and then get back, because these are people who you went through so many hardships with. These are actually contacts that are very, very important to each of you. So don't lose that. Okay. It's not worth anything. You might be technically, you might know how to build a race car, but what's the point? So make sure that you tie up rough patches after your events are done.
thanks a lot. And to everyone who joined in today, both on YouTube Live and also on Zoom, we really appreciate your time. You all have a wonderful evening.